Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes for people to join. I know it's kind of late right now, so there may not be many people joining. This is just a convenient time right now for me to do this live stream. I was originally scheduled to do it at 11, but things happen and I'm starting late. So I hope that you all can bear with me and work with me. Um, So people may not tune in, but I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. As you all know, last week they had the presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And during that debate, there was a discussion about white supremacists, and Donald Trump was explicitly asked to denounce white supremacist groups. And instead of doing so, Donald Trump uh, basically, he was called out on, um, the group Proud Boys, So he was like, name some names. Like, they asked him to denounce some white supremacist groups. They asked him to, would he denounce Proud Boys and all that kind of stuff. And he basically said that he would tell them to stand back and to stand by. And then he proceeded to basically attack left-wing groups like, Antifa and all that kind of stuff, and blame them for a lot of the violence that we see in America. He blamed them for the violence. He said most of the violence is coming from the far left. And he basically refused to condemn these white supremacist groups. And right after that debate, that group, Proud Boys, ended up taking that slogan, stand back and stand by, and using it in their propaganda, using it on their t-shirts and stuff like that, using it as some kind of rallying cry for their movement. So here you have Donald Trump once again showing that he panders to these white supremacists instead of openly condemning these white supremacists, instead of openly condemning a racist group like Proud Boys. This man proceeded to deflect and shift all the blame toward the left. And so what I'm going to do is go through some articles that go into detail about Proud Boys and about how racist it is and everything like that. But before I do that, it's important for people to realize that this is nothing new with Donald Trump. This man has a long history of pandering to these white supremacists. He has a history of caping for these white supremacists and defending these white supremacists. One of the clear examples of this is Charlottesville. After they had that race riot over there in Charlottesville, where you had all these hate groups come to Charlottesville defending symbols of racism, defending symbols of slavery and stuff like that. You had Donald Trump basically defending these people, talking about there were some very fine people on both sides. So that's one example. And then there's an example where he was on CNN and they asked him to denounce some endorsements that he received from racist groups like the KKK, racist people like David Duke. And I'm going to play this audio so that you can all hear this interview that Donald Trump did, where he's ducking and dodging and basically trying to weasel his way out of having to condemn white supremacists. So this is part of a pattern with this man. He deliberately panders to the most hateful elements of society. And then he wants to play and pretend like he has nothing to do with these people and that he's just willfully ignorant. He doesn't know anything about what's going on. So let me play this audio for you real quick. So let's get started. Hopefully you all can hear this. Just one
by KKK leader David Duke, and today on CNN, he was asked to disavow that endorsement.
Will you unequivocally condemn David Duke and say that you don't want his vote or that of other white supremacists in this election?
Well, just so you understand, I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I don't know anything about what you're even talking about with white supremacy or white supremacists. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know, did he endorse me or what's going on? Because, you know, I know nothing about David Duke. I know nothing about white supremacists. And so you're asking me a question that I'm supposed to be talking about people that I know nothing about.
But I guess the question from the Anti-Defamation League is, even if you don't know about their endorsement, there are these groups and individuals endorsing you. Would you just say unequivocally you condemn them and you don't want their support?
Well, I have to look at the group. I mean, I don't know what group you're talking about. You wouldn't want me to condemn a group that I know nothing about. I'd have to look. If you would send me a list of the groups, I will do research on them. And certainly I would disavow if I thought there was something wrong. But you may have groups in there that are totally fine, and it would be very unfair. So give me a list of the groups and I'll let you know.
Okay. I mean, I'm just talking about David Duke and the Ku Klux Klan here, but
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know David Duke. I don't believe I've ever met him. I'm pretty sure I didn't meet him, and I just don't know anything about him.
Says Mr. Trump tried.
So you had Donald Trump basically playing stupid, you know, pretending like he has no idea who David Duke is, even though this is a public figure, somebody who's a known hate monger, you know, somebody that was a grand dragon for the KKK. And then he said he doesn't know anything about these groups. And you had the interviewer mention the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and he didn't even say anything about that. He didn't even say he denounces the Ku Klux Klan, and clearly he heard what the interviewer had to say. He heard that interviewer mention the KKK. So this is a part of a pattern with Donald Trump. He constantly panders to these white supremacists and tries to play ignorant when he's called out on it. And he basically did the same thing with respect to Proud Boys. You know, he's telling them to stand back and to stand by, basically, you know, giving them a red light. And they see that as some kind of rallying cry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide some information about Proud Boys, you know, just the history of these groups. I'm going to provide you examples of some of the racist and bigoted things that their founder has said and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to read from Donald Trump's recent statement where he's now all of a sudden, all these days later, deciding that he's going to condemn racism and, you know, white supremacist groups. So let's get it right into it. So the first, let me share my screen so that you all can see this. Okay. So this first article is from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And as you all know, the Southern Poverty Law Center tracks hate groups. That's one of their missions. They monitor these hate groups. And one of the groups that they have listed on their website is Proud Boys. You know, it says, despite all their, you know, disavowals of bigotry, rank and file members of Proud Boys regularly spout white nationalist memes and maintain affiliations with known extremists. They're known for anti-Muslim statements that they put out, misogynistic rhetoric, and they actually worked to help organize that Charlottesville rally that I was talking about earlier. And that rally, as you all know, brought Klansmen, as this article points out, anti-Semites, Southern racists, and militia groups. And the member that helped organize that Charlottesville riot basically was expelled later after the violence and near universal condemnation of the Charlottesville quote unquote rally. And, you know, what these people try to do is they try to hide under these labels. They try to soften their image so that they can be more acceptable to a wider audience. So instead of just outright saying what they are, instead of just saying that they are white supremacists, they come up with terms like Western chauvinists. And, you know, one of the members basically said that's a PC term crafted to gain mainstream acceptance. And then he said, like, basically they're saying, like, if Proud Boys are pressed on the issue, I guarantee like 90% of them will tell you something along the lines that Hitler was right, gas the Jews. That's what somebody said that was a part of this organization. And then you have the founder having all these connections to hate sites, like he's contributed to various hate sites, including American Renaissance. And another site, Tacky Magazine, which featured contributors such as the notorious alt-right leader Richard Spencer and Jared Taylor, white supremacists. That's who this group aligns itself with. You know, and then they have all these bigoted, racist statements made by their leader. You know, one of their founders made all these statements about Muslims, about immigrants, derogatory, hateful statements. And when you break down the term Western chauvinism, that is nothing but a term for white supremacy. And let's just look up the term chauvinist. Hold on one second. So we need to look up the term chauvinist. It's just easier to just cut and paste so that we'll know exactly what we're talking about. Oh, just hold on one second, y'all. So it says a chauvinist, a person displaying aggressive or exaggerated patriotism, showing or relating to excessive or prejudiced loyalty or support for a particular group or cause. And their chauvinism is they call it Western chauvinism. So that's chauvinism propping up Western civilization. And Western is just another word for white civilization. So let's just keep it real. That's exactly what it means. You know, these people are white supremacists. So we talked about how the founder of the organization contributed to these racist websites, you know, alongside with people like Richard Spencer and Jared Taylor. And so you have all these negative statements that they made about immigrants and Muslims and women. They have a lot of misogynistic statements that they've made about women. And it doesn't just stop with that. They actually have made racist statements like here, this is a long quote that basically condemns affirmative action and basically says that it puts Black people in a situation where they're being forced to live up to expectations that they can't meet. And let me just read a couple of quick quotes from this. And, you know, it says the white liberal ethos tells us that Blacks aren't at MIT because of racism. They say Blacks dominate the prison population for the same reason. They insist that America is a racist hellhole where people of color have no future. This is way more dangerous to Black youth than the KKK. And it goes on to talk about how they strip people of culpability and tell them that the odds are stacked against them. And then it says white liberals make this worse by using affirmative action to correct society's mistakes. When Blacks are forced into schools that they aren't qualified for, they have no choice but to drop out. And instead of going back to school, to a school that they can handle, they tend to give up on higher education entirely. So, you know, they're promoting this idea that Black people are not qualified or not fit to go to certain universities, and that's the reason why you have people drop out. So it's promoting this idea that Black people are intellectually inferior. And also in here, they cite how the founder refers to, the person that wrote the book, The Bell Curve. And basically that book promotes this notion that Black people are intellectually inferior. So let me read on further. I'm going to focus primarily on the quotes that deal with race. Here's another quote. "I'm not afraid to speak out about the atrocities that whites and people of European descent face, not only here in this country, but in Western nations across the world." So you have this situation where these people are playing up white fear and white anxiety, a typical example of white supremacist rhetoric. It goes on to say that the war against whites and Europeans in Western society is very real, and it's time that we all start talking about it and stop worrying about political correctness and optics. And then this goes into more detail about how this founder was asked about this particular New York neighborhood. And he said, well, at least there aren't niggers or Mexicans. He's talking about the people in the neighborhood. At least they're white. So this is something that the founder of this group had to say about a neighborhood in New York. And you can tell a lot about an organization based on who actually founded the organization. Now, you have some people that are trying to say, oh, well, they're not racist. That guy is no longer affiliated with Proud Boys and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is he founded the organization. He set the tone and the pace for the organization. And it's too late for these people to try to disclaim him now, to try to make it seem like, oh, he was just a bad actor. And this is the founder. This is not just a rogue member. This is the person who organized and set up the organization. Here's another statement from him where he said, "I love being white, and I think it's something to be very proud of." And we know that kind of rhetoric is rhetoric of white supremacists. What they try to do is use a false equivalency, and they say, well, you have these other groups like African Americans that can talk about their pride, and other types of groups like Latinos and stuff. But when white people say it is racism, the fact of the matter is, the only reason why Black people have to use that kind of language is because we live in a society that for the longest time tried to teach us that we were inferior. And not only tried to teach us that, but had institutions to put us in a second class position, a position of oppression and stuff like that. So, when people say they're Black and they're proud, they're rallying against a system of oppression. But here you have a situation where the actual maintainers of that system of white supremacy are talking about they love being white. And that's just cold words for believing that whiteness is superior. And, he goes on to say this. He said, "I don't want our culture diluted. We need to close the borders now and let everyone assimilate to Western white English speaking way of life." So again, that's more teaching of basically the superiority of Western civilization and whiteness. And then this goes on to talk about how he wrote for these white nationalist websites, affiliated with people like Jared Taylor. And then this is what I was mentioning earlier about the bell curve. That author's name is Charles Murray. And, this guy, the founder of the group, said, "While I don't harbor any hatred for minorities," he went on to say that they refuse, that white liberals refuse to acknowledge innate disparities between people of different races, meaning that there are natural disparities between Black people and white people. And it goes on to say a notion he supported using long discredited work of Charles Murray. And Charles Murray, again, is the author of The Bell Curve. And then he goes on to say this, he says, we're all forced to live side by side. We will quickly realize we're incompatible and agree to disagree. So basically you have him supporting this notion that people of different races don't even need to be together. That's basically what he's saying there. So it goes on, and there are other examples of racist views, and I'm going to, I'll just post this in the description box so that you all can read it. And then you have another write-up by the Anti-Defamation League, where they talk about this organization. They describe it as misogynistic, Islamophobic, transphobic, anti-immigration. It says some members espouse white supremacist and anti-Semitic ideologies and engage with white supremacists. And then it talks about the history of violence of this organization. Like one of the things that they take pride in is confronting Antifa activists, and they violently confront them. And members of Proud Boys have actually been arrested for violence. So that is very important because you have Donald Trump using this military type language when talking about Proud Boys, telling them to stand back but to stand by. Basically, just like you have some troops, you say hold back, stand by for now, wait until it's time for you till we give you the order to handle the business or to invade or to attack or something like that. And it's no surprise that Donald Trump would say something like this, because this is a man who regularly has encouraged violence at his rallies. And he's actually talked about or suggested that if he loses the election, it won't be a peaceful transition in power. So it goes on to talk about how members have taken part in multiple acts of brutal violence and intimidation. And it says that they've served as a volunteer security force for the GOP. It goes on to talk about how Jason Kessler, and that's the person that I was referring to earlier, was the primary organizer of the deadly 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. He's a former Proud Boy. And it talks about how members were convicted of various crimes here. So you all can read this. It goes into the history, some of the things that I've already said. And actually, there was a video released where you had a Proud Boy warning about what would happen if Donald Trump doesn't win the election. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that video and play the audio real quick. So if you can just bear with me 1 second so that we know exactly what type of organization that we're talking about here. Just 1 second, y'all. Yeah, let me see if I can find it on my Facebook page. It may not. Hold on 1 second. Just bear with me a second. Just bear with me 1 quick second. It was on World Star. Let me try to pull it up real quick. They may have taken it down for threats. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, so I'm not going to hold you all up, but there's a video. And once I find it, what I'll do is I'll post it in the description box where you have this, this member of Proud Boys talking about what will happen if Donald Trump doesn't win the election. And he's basically threatening groups like Black Lives Matter and basically saying that they're not ready for an armed conflict and stuff like that. So I'll post that link in the description box once I find the video. I don't want to hold you all up. So I'm going to go to this article that goes into what Donald Trump said about, during the Democratic debate. I talked about it earlier, but I just want to provide more detail, more context to what he said. So it said that the far-right group Proud Boys celebrated on Tuesday night after being mentioned during the first presidential debate, where Donald Trump was asked, are you willing to condemn white supremacist militia groups and to say they need to stand down and not add to the violence in these cities and stuff like that? So that's what Chris Wallace says to Donald Trump. He asked him that question. And Donald Trump says, I'm willing to do that. And then he's pushed for an outright answer. And then Donald Trump asks, do you want me to name, basically saying, do you want me to name the groups that I'm denouncing? And then Joe Biden says, what about Proud Boys, basically? And then Donald Trump tells Proud Boys this. He says, Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. So that is not a condemnation of white supremacist groups. That is not a denunciation of white supremacist groups. It's him basically telling them to stand down for now and stand by and wait till you have instructions. That's basically what that suggests. And then he goes on, as I said earlier, to shift the blame to groups like Antifa. He says, but I'll tell you, somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing problem. So that's him deflecting, as I mentioned earlier. And the thing about this, the thing that makes that statement so ridiculous is that even his own government agencies have said that white supremacists are the greatest threat to national security in the country. Like, they're the greatest threat in terms of any kind of terrorist threat. This is his own government agency saying this, but he's downplaying the role of these white supremacists and focusing on groups like Antifa. And from what I've read, Antifa is not even an actual organization. That's an ideology. It's not a group. It's not like a group like Proud Boys or anything like that. So you had a president of the United States basically giving this white supremacist group a pass. And at this point, nobody should be surprised by this. So in order to have some kind of damage control and stuff like that, you've had these groups, Proud Boys, bring out this Latino guy to basically say, well, hey, we're not racist. We have this Afro-Latino man who's a leader in the movement. And if you look at these pictures from this group, Proud Boys, all of these people are virtually white. And even this quote unquote Afro-Latino dude is very light-skinned. And there's a question about his racial identity. I was watching this live stream that the brother Psychopatheus had up, and he actually showed the arrest records of this guy. And this leader's name, I don't have it in front of me, but this leader claims that he's some Afro-Latino or whatever. But when he was arrested, according to these records, he identified himself as white. So what I'll do is I'll post a link to Psycho's video, and Psycho was referencing something that Tariq Nasheed posted. So you have somebody now pretending to be Afro-Latina Afro-Latinos, excuse me. But when they were arrested and charged with a crime, they identified as white. So they're trying to play games with us, man. They're trying to run game on us by putting out this token, quote unquote, Afro-Latino person to make it seem as if this organization is not racist. As far as I'm concerned, this Afro-Latino dude is no different from that blind Klansman that was on the Dave Chappelle show. I mean, he's no different than that. You know, he's completely blind, deaf, and dumb and ignorant. And I was watching this this news broadcast from Vice News, and the funny thing is, Vice News was founded by the same person that founded Proud Boys. But Vice News, they did a story about this, and they talked about how you have a lot of these right-wing Cubans that flee socialist Cuba, and they come to America, and they have right-wing views. You know, they're anti-socialist and anti any kind of programs that they deem to be socialist and stuff like that. So a lot of these people gravitate towards the Republicans and the right and all that kind of stuff. And they don't identify with, you know, other immigrant Latino communities, you know, like you know, Guatemalans and all that kind of stuff, all these other groups. They see themselves as distinct and separate from those other groups. And they have a different experience because they're coming from Cuba. And a lot of these people are some of the most reactionary people ever because they're fleeing a country that's a revolutionary country, despite what people may say about Cuba and stuff. So yeah, that's the situation. They put out this token Afro-Latino guy to deceive people, to run game on people, to just lead people into thinking, oh, this can't be racist. And when I first posted about this, like I had people on my Facebook page saying, oh, they can't be racist. They got this token Afro-Latino guy. And that's no different from these corporations that try to run game on civil rights organizations. Like when they're confronted about the lack of diversity or whatever, they'll put a few token Negroes in positions so that they can get rid of allegations of racism. And that's exactly what this group has done. They have this token person out here. The only one that I've seen, like this is the only person of color that I've seen. And even that's questionable if this person is even in fact a person of color. But this is the only person that I've seen, for the most part, this of color, this a part of this group, Proud Boys. I don't see any black members of this organization, African American members, or you know, Arab members or other ethnicities, Asian members, or any of that kind of stuff. Because as they say in their own rhetoric, they say that they are Western chauvinists. But these are the people that Donald Trump has, you know, refused to condemn initially. And then it was only when he came under pressure that he decided to finally say something about this. And I'm going to show you this article. So it says that President Donald Trump condemned all white supremacists Thursday evening after pointedly refusing to do so at Tuesday's presidential debate. So here it is, you know, several days later, where a couple of days later, he finally decides to condemn all white supremacists. And this is only because of the pressure that has been applied to this man. He said, I condemn the KKK, I condemn all white supremacists, I condemn the Proud Boys. I don't know much about the Proud Boys, almost nothing, but I condemn that. So there you have him again playing stupid, acting like he doesn't know what's going on, like he has no idea who the Proud Boys are and all that kind of stuff. And then this goes on to point out what I was saying earlier, that his own FBI director says that the largest top domestic terror concern are these white supremacists. And this talked about how the White House initially showed no signs of backing down from Trump's refusal to condemn white supremacists. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute and just share some thoughts that I have about this. I mean, here you have a man and an administration that is refused to condemn white supremacists, that is caped for white supremacists, that is pandered to these white supremacists, but yet and still you have people still on the fence when it comes to this election. Like, I'm like, what more evidence do you need to finally wake up and realize what's at stake in this election? What more evidence do you need to finally realize that these two candidates, these two top tier candidates, are not one and the same? You know, we have two choices in this election, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And when you look at a man who refuses to condemn white supremacy, makes excuses for white supremacy, is endorsed by white supremacy, the choice should be clear and obvious. These white supremacists are using his talking points for their propaganda, you know, for their T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. These white supremacist groups proudly wear those Make America Great Again hats. And all that means is make America white again. That's what that slogan means. But people are still in la la land. People are still sleeping and stuff like that, still not realizing the importance of this election. So let me see what folks are saying before I close out. You know, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. So you got somebody saying, you know, people say stuff without even providing anything to back up what they're talking about. So I'm not going to even acknowledge that with a statement. Then you have some people trolling here. So let me remove these trolls from the chat. Yeah, it's like 30 days to the election. So hopefully people will vote out Donald Trump. I mean, what more evidence do people need to get rid of this guy? I mean, if you just look at how he's dealt with this COVID-19 situation, this pandemic, where we have over 200,000 people dead, and we have this guy, after running around with no mask on, after downplaying the significance of this virus, ends up catching this virus. And then instead of taking it seriously, this guy engages in these publicity stunts that are exposing more people to the virus. You know, he's doing his drive-by in the limousine, waving to the crowd. Then he's posing for pictures and all that kind of stuff, walking around the White House. I mean, that White House is like a cesspool of COVID-19. You got all those people in that White House coming down with that virus, and that's a threat to national security. Like, who in their right mind would greenlight something like this? Like, why is this man walking around and he's still highly contagious? Why is he in the White House right now? Like, this is all a show. And it's just a shame that this is the kind of irresponsible person that we have as a leader of this nation. And it's just a shame that people just don't realize what's at stake in this election. You know, some of these people are talking about don't vote and all that kind of stuff. These are some of the most ignorant and stupid people giving that kind of advice. And I think that some of them are frankly working for Donald Trump. And as I did, you know, indicated before, there's a news report put out by this British news agency where they talked about how Donald Trump's campaign paid millions of dollars to actually deter Black people from voting. And I think that some of these personalities that you see here on YouTube may be on the bankroll for the Trump administration. They may be deliberately trying to deter you from voting, because Donald Trump knows that by deterring Black voters from voting, it makes it more likely for him to win. He actually bragged about how he was able to win the election because a lot of black people didn't vote. But yet and still, you had these ignoramuses on here encouraging black people not to vote at all, to sit home. Shout out to Covina, man. Shout out to Bonafide 1970. Yeah, so it's just a shame, man. It's just a shame that you would have a president basically refusing to condemn white supremacy, refusing to condemn a group like Proud Boys. And then Proud Boys has these publicity stunts, like they did this this meeting with Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, trying to make it seem like they're not racist. It's like a PR campaign. But we see right through it. We know what time it is. You know, as I was saying before, there's this member that was on tape threatening people if Donald Trump loses. Yeah, so somebody, I see Elmo's World pointed out that there's a YouTuber, somebody on YouTube calling himself the Tragic Mulatto, who's saying to call a song, excuse me, Didn't Do Nothing. And that's just a racist terminology that these white supremacists use against black people. And I'm not going to go into much detail about that terminology. So this person, Elmo World, is talking about how you have another one of these token people trying to make it seem like this group is not racist. Yeah, so Psycho is here. Let's see, hold on one second. Psycho said that's a whole white Latino. And that's one thing that people need to realize, like, being Latino doesn't necessarily mean somebody's a person of color. Like, you have white Latinos, you have native Latinos, you have black Latinos. It's a culture and it's not necessarily a race. So some of these Latinos are white. You know, some of them are, I mean, the whole Latino group, they come from, you know, the Spaniards that came to this hemisphere and colonized, you know, places like Mexico and, you know, places in so-called Latin America. They colonized those places and they enslaved African people. That's why you have, quote unquote, Afro-Latinos. And then you have the mixture of these Spaniards with the indigenous people and stuff. So that's how you have this large grouping of Latinos and stuff like that. So, yeah, so I'm not going to go into more detail about that COVID-19 situation. Because I did a prior video on that. So let's see if there are any other points that I want to address. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to thank you all for tuning in. Please rate, comment, subscribe, like the video, share the video, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content on here. Shout out to everyone that tuned in tonight. Shout out to Psycho. Shout out to Covina, man. Shout out to, who was the other person? Covina. Oh, Bonafide 1970. Shout out to you. So with that, peace and blessings, everyone. Have a good evening.